I remember my mother telling a friend that my pediatrician had been practicing medicine for over 20 years. I was puzzled by this revelation and admittedly a little concerned. You see, I had heard something about practicing before. For example, I was encouraged to practice the piano. I also prided myself on practicing my layups and free throws in basketball. I also knew that I did what I did on the piano and playing basketball because I wasn't yet very good at it, and that I needed to practice. This conflation of two different situations caused me to ask my mother with some concern, "Did you say something about Dr. Marting practicing medicine?" She said, "Yes." And then I said, "Why are you taking me to someone who needs to practice medicine? Shouldn't I be going to someone who already knows it?" I must say that my relationship to my doctor was fraught with linguistic peril, as I remember when I was just learning to read and wondered why, as we were driving along, there occasionally would be a sign that warned pediatricians crossing. Let's get back to the practice bit. Share with your friends, thank you. Let's get back to the practice bit. When you were growing up, and even today, I expect you occasionally may hear that practice makes perfect. Practice makes perfect. A seemingly innocuous statement, one that I'll bet everyone in the room feels he or she understands. Today, with a little help from my friends, I intend to explore this seemingly incontrovertible statement and challenge our assumptions about what it means or if it's valid. Obviously, my first example of the pediatrician practicing medicine was intended to remind us that there are a few ways to interpret the term practice. Taken as most words we know are from the Latin, practicus, related to practical, and the Greek practikos, meaning to pass through or over, to experience, transact, negotiate, or practice. While some of you, I expect, are longing for me to linger on the linguistic antecedents of our current English understanding of this term, I sadly shall not do so, except to suggest a certain amount of malleability in how the word practice has come to be. For doctors and lawyers and even teachers, the practicing they do has to do with the actual application of knowledge as opposed to the mere possession of knowledge. In the use of practice concerning these professions, there's also implicitly a suggestion of repeated or customary action. In the phrase with which I started, however, practice makes perfect, there is another implication, one that my 8-year-old self understood. That suggestion has to do almost exclusively with repetition and reassessment. Whether I was practicing piano or organ or trombone or foul shooting or my handwriting, what I understood practice to be was a repetitive action leading to getting better at something. A repetitive action leading to getting better at something. For many of us who study an instrument, for example, there is plenty of work associated with practicing. In too many circumstances, a rudimentary teacher requires us to spend what would seem to be an inordinate amount of time playing scales, arpeggios, and the like, before we get the bonus of actually learning a piece. Over time, the pieces begin to occupy more of the time. For me, often led to my playing on my own, popular and especially Beatles tunes, not on my teacher's list. But the scales and the arpeggios continue. What one learns from the act of practicing is that to get good at anything requires plenty of work. This work is often airless, punishing work. It's repetitive and dull. But if done right, the work of practicing becomes less arduous because we get better at it. We get more fluid and physically coordinated. In the case of playing piano, our hands and our head get better connected. Playing the organ, it's our head and hands and feet that have to work together. A feat of coordination that requires even greater practice. It takes a leap of faith to imagine that it will lead to something wonderful someday. In other words, that the hard work will pay off. Sometimes we have to fool ourselves into practicing, to make a game of it. I lived across the street from a playground. It was a schoolboy's dream. Almost every evening in the good weather, I would shoot baskets. It didn't matter much if others were there and wanted to play. I ended every session with a certain ritual involving right layup, center layup, left layup, and reverse 10 times without missing, or I would have to start it all again. And then there were 10 foul shots that had to be made in a row, 50 all told. I couldn't leave until I had achieved these self-imposed rigors. Often the streetlights came on, and my mother was calling me home before I had achieved my basic workout, my practice. It's fair to say that indeed the goal for any passion, athletic, academic, artistic, personal, should not be to get perfect at it. The goal should be to improve, to get better, to pursue excellence. I'm lucky today because several of my friends, students and colleagues have agreed to talk a bit about each's response to the practice makes perfect prompt. You will see in their testimonials much that is similar, a deep commitment to their work, for example. But you will also hear variations on how the improvement is realized. What are your rituals? How do you get psyched to put in the time? Where does the discipline come from? How can one endure the deferred gratification that is implicit in all this? Where does criticism come from? Internal, or from revered mentors or various audiences? How can one measure success? I know you will benefit, as I have, from their insights. First, Mr. Bettendorf and Senior Ryan.
Mr. Brennan asked me to talk about teaching. Teaching is really all about learning. After all, if my students aren't learning, can I really claim to be teaching? For me, this principle dictates that I try always to keep learning, because understanding how people learn means I need to be learning too. Whether it's struggling with French, practicing the piano, or taking up bridge, I try to stay in good form as a learner. I'm also always learning from other teachers. If I need an idea to improve something in a class, I typically consult my colleagues. For example, if I need help giving useful feedback on a student paper, I might go to Dr. Pocatello, Mr. Randall, or Dr. Stearns to get an expert opinion. In that way, I am availing myself of nearly a century of experience, counting all three at once, of course, not just Mr. Randall. You might think I would be embarrassed to admit to borrowing my best material, but I subscribe to C.S. Lewis' maxim that no man who seeks to be original ever will be. My goal is to do the best I can to teach the material to that group of students, and the uniqueness of each of us, teacher and student, will make it new.
Painting. People often ask me if I paint in another media besides watercolor, and I always say no, because I haven't finished with watercolor yet. I fell in love with watercolor when I was a sophomore in high school. I had no experience, no formal training, just a talent for art that was passed down from my great uncle on my mother's side, who was an illustrator for Disney, down to my mother, who was extremely talented herself. But I quickly reached the ceiling, got frustrated that I wasn't progressing. As Providence would have it, a few years later, I was connected with an artist who took me under his wing, and from whom I took weekly lessons for 3 years. It was humbling to watch a master at work, and I learned so much from him by asking countless questions, by parroting him, by following him step by step as he guided me and my classmates through creation, painting after painting. What I didn't realize until later was that I was constantly internalizing lessons, approaches, strategies that eventually allowed me to produce my own paintings with confidence. My mentor shared so much wisdom with me along the way, and much of that wisdom anchors my approach. He not only taught me to take time to look, in my case that means at nature, at shadows, at trees, etc., but also to ask myself what made me stop and look, what captured my eye about this scene, and to focus on that and paint my response. I've had the most success as a painter when I've stayed true to that wisdom, and also when I've surrendered myself to the medium, indulged in the passion that I have for it, to let the excitement of creating dispel the fear of failure. Truth be told, I am a perfectionist in recovery. While I sense that this will be a lifelong struggle, I often rely on the wisdom of another mentor. In this case, a spiritual mentor who guided me to a new way of thinking that helped me move past that desire for perfection. It involves a humble acceptance of both my limitations and where I am at any time in my growth as a person, as a man of faith, as an artist. And lastly, as my wife regularly reminds me, it's important to remember that my talent for art is a gift that God gave me, that I had nothing to do with it. Yet it's my responsibility to nurture it, to develop it, to practice it. Pride wants me to find external motivation to become better, to improve. But when I remember that it's a gift, I'm free to pursue the talent in whichever direction the Spirit leads me.
Most practitioners commit themselves to regular, extensive work at their craft. How much is necessary to get really good, to become a master? Malcolm Gladwell, a well-known commentator on the current human condition, offered his assessment of what it takes in his book, Outliers. Quote, Exhibit A in the talent argument is a study done in the early 1990s by the psychologist K. Anders Ericsson and two colleagues at Berlin's elite Academy of Music. With the help of the Academy's professors, they divided the school's violinists into three groups. In the first group were the stars, the students with the potential to become world-class soloists. In the second were those judged to be merely good. And the third were students who were unlikely to ever play professionally. All of the violinists were then asked the same question. Over the course of your entire career, ever since you first picked up the violin, how many hours have you practiced? Everyone from all three groups started playing at roughly the same age, around 5 years old. In those first few years, everyone practiced roughly the same amount, about 2 to 3 hours a week. But when the students were around the age of 8, real differences started to emerge. The students who would end up the best in their class began to practice more than everyone else. 6 hours a week by age 9, 8 hours a week by age 12, 16 hours a week by age 14, and up, until by the age of 20 they were practicing, that is, purposefully and single-mindedly playing their instruments with the intent to get better, well over 30 hours a week. In fact, by the age of 20, the elite performers had each totaled 10,000 hours of practice. By contrast, the merely good students had totaled 8,000 hours, and the future rudimentary players had totaled just over 4,000 hours. Ericsson and his colleagues then compared amateur pianists with professional pianists. The same pattern emerged. The amateurs never practiced more than about 3 hours a week over the course of their childhood. By the age of 20, they had totaled 2,000 hours of practice. The professionals, on the other hand, steadily increased their practice time every year, until by the age of 20, they, like the violinists, had reached 10,000 hours. The striking thing about Ericsson's study is that he and his colleagues couldn't find any naturals, musicians who floated effortlessly to the top while practicing a fraction of the time their peers did. Nor could they find any grinds, people who worked harder than everyone else, yet just didn't have what it takes to break the top ranks. Their research suggests that once a musician has enough ability to get into the top music school, the thing that distinguishes one performer from another is how hard he or she works. That's it. And what's more, the people at the very top don't work just harder or even much harder than everyone else. They work much, much harder. The idea that excellence in performing a complex task requires a critical amount of practice surfaces again and again in studies of expertise. In fact, researchers have settled on what they believe is the magic number for true expertise, 10,000 hours. The emerging picture from studies is that 10,000 hours of practice is required to achieve the level of mastery associated with being a world-class expert in anything, writes the neurologist Daniel Levitin. Quote, in study after study of composers, basketball players, fiction writers, ice skaters, concert pianists, chess players, master criminals, and what have you, this number comes up again and again. Of course, this doesn't address why some people get more out of their practice sessions than others do, but no one has yet found a case in which true world-class expertise was accomplished in less time. It seems that it takes the brain this long to assimilate all that it needs to know to achieve true mastery. And now I'd like to call up Eric Zaks, Eric Zoe, Millen Rosen, and James Henschen.
I'll be talking about playing the cello. Learning to play the cello has taught me that achieving a high level at anything requires time, self-reflection, and willpower. I started taking cello lessons when I was 4 years old. For the past 14 years, I have put more time into my instrument than any other single thing. Over the course of learning a piece, I'll spend hours tuning the same chords and repeating the same patterns. Repetition is an unavoidable aspect of improving at any task and takes a lot of time. But repetition means nothing if you cannot tell what you're doing wrong. What distinguishes great musicians from ordinary ones is their ability to observe their own playing and understand what they can do better. For me, this is the most difficult challenge. Simply playing something over and over again will never lead to a flawless performance. Being able to listen closely and implement changes quickly is crucial. Every musician strives for perfection, but this goal is impossible to achieve. You can play every note exactly in tune, but feel unsatisfied with the performance. A musician uses the notes on the page as guideposts for a greater, more interpretive, personal expression to be realized. A musician plays a piece the way he or she wants it to sound, and there's always something that can be changed. The final aspect required to succeed is willpower. Passion and ambition are powerful motivators that can drive you to pursue a task. But motivation does not make musicians love to practice all the time. Often, there is no part of me that wants to spend a couple of hours alone in a room. But I know that I have to do it because that is the only way I will improve. Determination and discipline are necessary to becoming excellent at something, prevailing against the many opportunities they put.
We'll be speaking about art. As an artist now, I hardly feel like I'm perfect. I believe that perfection does not exist in art because it is a deeply personal and subjective activity. Looking at myself, I think that while I have improved a lot over the past 18 years of my life, I still can improve in many areas. In my own experience, being self-critical has helped to put me on a path to improvement. When I was younger, I often worked on skills by repetition and by drawing whenever I had the chance. But at a certain point, I decided I wanted to bring myself to a higher level of art making. To do so, I started to observe my own art and other art more seriously. First, I began to criticize my own art more, thinking about ways I could grow and improve. Later, when I visited museums or galleries, I studied the artwork and compared it to my own pieces. Whether I looked at the impeccable rendering of light and color in a Monet, or the delicate carving of a Roman statue, I always discovered new approaches that I could apply to my own art-making process. Since creating art is a very personal process that involves contemplation and deep thought, I think that examining yourself and your work can elevate your artwork to a new level of sophistication. My experience has taught me that one cannot improve with mindless repetition. I've learned that analyzing and criticizing your own work, and then following through by implementing changes is the way to improve upon thinking and techniques. Continuing this point, many of you have heard me say that I don't have a favorite painting or work. The reason behind this lies in my critical attitude. I believe that I am still growing as an artist, and that although I feel proud after finishing a painting, there are always things to improve on. To me, there is always something I find issue with when I look at my work. In my opinion, art is such an expansive field that there is always something to learn and something to do differently. There is no such thing as perfect, but you can always improve your sense of self-expression and your art. I would like to also point out that peers are so vital when it comes to seeing the possibilities in art. When people have different expressions of thought, there is always a variety of approaches and a variety of techniques. Looking at these different pieces of art created by others has personally helped me to see how infinite art is, and it has inspired me to try out new things when it comes to making art. This concept of inspiration leads me to another important aspect of practice makes perfect: passion and drive. Although I know I'll never be perfect at art, I still continue to pursue it. Why? I have a genuine love for making art, and I enjoy the feeling of accomplishing something. I find it fulfilling when I can tangibly create something that illustrates my state of mind or my view of the world. And when I finish a work, I'm even more excited to know that I can approach my next work differently and experiment with ways to improve my skills. In this way, practicing creates a drive to practice more and more. And even though I will never reach the myth of perfection, I'll learn to express myself in new and better ways.
I'm going to be talking about pole vaulting. So one thing that you guys have all heard so far throughout this hall is that in order to be good at something and eventually perfect at it, it takes time, right? We see professional athletes, musicians, artists, and we say, oh, they became that good because they spent 10,000 hours, 20,000 hours just practicing. But in my experience, this is only partly true. Yes, the more you practice, the better you get, but in order for this practice makes perfect sentiment to hold true, you have to practice the right way. If you do something the wrong way 1,000 times in a row, you'll be able to do that wrong action really well, but it's wrong. The need to practice well is especially relevant in pole vaulting. Pole vaulting is one of the hardest and most technique-oriented sports in the world. So natural athleticism and time by themselves don't get you very far. There are about 1 million different little technique-based elements that go into a perfect vault, and all of them are crammed into about a 5-second period. So naturally, just like in any other situation, when we are bombarded with many different possibilities, it's impossible to individually focus on each of these things and consciously make the effort to do each one right. But trying to get better by repetitively throwing yourself into a situation where you have to focus on so many things at once is not going to get you anywhere. Every time you will be overwhelmed, and every time you will fail. In order to succeed, you need to break down this complicated process, putting yourself in a situation where there's only one thing to be focused on. And in this situation, now repetitions and time work their magic. When I first started pole vaulting, my coach didn't let me jump onto the mat for the entire first month. And once I had started to jump up, it took another month before I was then allowed to try to swing up, and another few months after that before I was allowed to turn, and then about 4 months after that before going over an actual bar. I hated my coach at times and was bored out of my mind some other times, but now I don't have to focus on all of those little things I spent so much time practicing. And without having to focus on these things, I can devote my attention to learning and mastering the next thing in the path to the perfect vault. Starting small and building up slowly gives you the foundation to work up, instead of just blindly throwing yourself at a complicated task and hoping it all sort of just works itself out. Even now, 4 years later, I still follow that same process in order to improve. I focus on a small detail of my vault, whether it's how high my knees are during my run, or how straight my left arm is during takeoff, and I just forget about everything else. And I keep running, or I keep taking off, until I can get that one thing right. And then I move on to the next. Obviously, I will never be able to achieve that perfect vault, and in general, no one will really be able to achieve perfection in their sport or activity, but with each new little thing you focus on, and with each little improvement, you can become a whole lot better in the future. Thank you.
When I watch basketball on TV, I'm always surprised when a player misses a free throw. I mean, they are supposed to be free, right? But when I'm actually the one in a clutch situation, too often I miss it. Although someone may never be able to shoot 100% on free throws, the only way to improve your percentage is to practice a lot. You have to shoot free throws until the proper motion is completely muscle memory. This means practice and repetition, and more repetition, and even more repetition. Dribble, dribble, spin, focus where the rim meets the backboard, dribble once more, and shoot. Doing this thousands and thousands of times is the only way to improve my chances in those clutch moments. I go out to my driveway or anywhere I can find a hoop, and I shoot again and again. All this practice certainly doesn't lead to perfection, but I hope it will mean I'll be better next season.
We have talked often about the need to seek help in any number of situations. We have consistently underscored the value of failure. Developing humility is not a bad thing, and we often learn a great deal from instances in which we have failed. For example, imagine the poor character of whom I speak. Defeated for his state legislature, failed in business. 2 years later, his girlfriend died. A year later, he had a nervous breakdown. 2 years later, he was defeated to be Speaker of his state legislature. 5 years later, he was defeated for his party's nomination for Congress. 3 years later, he was elected to Congress, but chose not to run for a second term according to the philosophy of his party. 6 years later, he was defeated for the U.S. Senate. And 2 years after that, he was defeated for the nomination for Vice President. 2 years after that, he was again defeated for the U.S. Senate. This was in 1858. 2 years later, in 1860, he was elected President of the United States. Did Abraham Lincoln learn anything from all this adversity? For sure he did. And he ended up being the United States' most admired president. The best have often been shaped and burnished thanks to plenty of disappointments, the gut check and analysis that comes with defeats, and the grit that propels one to give it another try. You might know that the greatest basketball player ever to play the game, apologies Clevelanders, that's Michael Jordan, was cut from his high school varsity squad in both his freshman and sophomore years. He grew up, got stronger, and learned from his disappointments. In his case, it also all turned out all right. And now would you please welcome Walker, Oberg, Dr. Kokotilo, and Max Hutter.
Okay.
I'll be speaking about tennis. I play tennis knowing that I will never play a perfect match. That said, I am in good company. Even though Roger Federer is the GOAT, with 20 Grand Slam titles, would it surprise you to know that he loses about 20% of the time? And furthermore, in some of his greatest victories, he only wins just over 50% of the points. In fact, in what many people consider to be his greatest victory, the 2008 Wimbledon Championship against Rafael Nadal, he won fewer total points than Rafa did, 204 to 209. On the Roxbury Latin grading scale, Roger would be getting a B- grade for his win ratio and a failing grade for his point ratio. Yet, he is still considered the GOAT. Why? Because although he loses 20% of the time, he uses these losses to learn and improve, which then enables him to win 80% of the time. In my case, it is clear that repeatedly accepting and learning from failure is the fastest way to improvement. Trust me, I get a lot of practice at the failure part. However, giving 100% effort in practice and learning from failure in my matches are the most important steps to improve. This cycle repeats, and I embrace my practice sessions. Sometimes I experience success, but mostly I continue to practice, learn, and improve. The best part about my passion in tennis is that I practice and play only as much as I want to. No more, no less. What I've learned over time is that the more effort and time I give to my practices and my matches, the better my results. However, this is only to a point given the constraints of my life. To carve out enough time to feed my desire to play, I am required to be efficient in other areas of my life, such as schoolwork and other extracurricular areas. Although these other activities take up a lot of time, they are also very important because they keep my desire for practice unsatisfied. If I only had tennis and no other demands on my time, tennis would become a job. And there is a fine line between the passion and the job. Here's the difference. I love the burgers and chips lunch at RL. In fact, I might choose to have that lunch every day of the year. But if you told me that the only thing that RL ever served was burgers and chips, I might not want that lunch as much. That's the difference between a passion and a job. Passions inspire us to keep practicing and improving because even when we are staring failure in the eye, we are choosing to pursue it. So if you're like me and your passion only lets you succeed half the time or less, know that you're perfectly fine being imperfect.
In fly fishing, practice does indeed make perfect, but perfection does not equal success. Let's talk about the practice first. It's not easy to learn how to cast a nearly weightless fly. You actually cast a line, which takes the fly with it, but the line is unwieldy. Most people learn to cast, therefore, on dry land without a trout in sight. What you have to learn is a technique, one that has more to do with rhythm and sensitivity than with strength and power. The technique consists of a 4-count motion of your forearm, with your arm holding the rod at the level of your ear, reaching back to about 2 on an imaginary clock, and forward to about 10. It sounds simple, but it's not. And it becomes even more complicated when you add water. You have to cast the fly so that it lands naturally on the surface. If you thrash the water with the line, the trout will be startled and dart away. What makes fly fishing more complicated yet is that the water moves. In a river or stream, the current can take the line, causing the fly to drag across the surface in an unnatural way, and the trout will ignore it. Still, casting can be practiced and perfected, even in moving water. Many times while fly fishing, I know I have made a perfect cast, but no trout has risen to the fly. How can that be? I've said in frustration. That cast was perfect. It deserves a trout. But the trout, unlike the cast, is out of my control. Perhaps it wasn't hungry. Perhaps it wasn't there. Either way, the magical moment didn't happen. When a camouflaged trout rises unseen until the last second and breaks the surface of the water, occasionally propelled by its strike into the air above, its colors reflected in the light for just a moment. There's a difference then between perfection and success. Perfection depends upon you and your willingness to practice. Success depends upon something else and its own needs and desires. It depends on the trout. Perfection may be a personal accomplishment, but success is a magical encounter with an elusive other.
I will be speaking about golf. Any golfer will tell you that perfecting your golf swing is impossible. Even the professional golfers lose aspects of their swings and need to relearn and rework them. This often means long hours at the range. As I became better at golf, my desire to win drove my desire to improve my practice. This included more focused time and more of a commitment as a whole. I soon started to view hours on the range differently because I had a distinct goal. My goal was to win a big tournament. The tournament wins came, but as I have progressed and am now traveling around the country for tournaments, perfecting the technical aspects of my strokes has become even more important. When I entered RL, I realized it would be hard to play a school sport, have time for homework, and find the time to practice and compete in golf. I knew that I had to become more efficient with the limited time I could spend on golf. Compared to my national and international competitors, I'm at a further disadvantage due to our long New England winters. This has forced me to play indoors during the winter, hitting off turf mats in a simulator which calculates and projects where my shot would have landed on a real course after I hit a ball into the net. Given these challenges, I have sought to maximize my shorter practice sessions through making swing-focused goals that are smaller and very specific. At each practice, I use videos of my swing to help adjust and refine a precise aspect like swing plan. This fits my schedule and my personality because I'm not one to mindlessly hit balls on the range. I always need a game, a particular drill or competition, or something on which to focus, or I soon become bored. As I have changed my game and continue to improve, figuring out the optimal practice has become its own goal. I've had to alter the way I practice to best suit me and my circumstances, but I understand it will continue to change and improve as I continue to play golf through RL and college.
In many cases, what was begun when someone was younger, smaller, more naive persists throughout one's life. The work, the focus, the incipient passion flowers fully as one gets older. Usually the foundational elements of what one has learned and practiced become important habits, not just as the habits regard the particular passion, as we will hear shortly concerning running, singing, and acting, and writing, the habits of trying hard, offering commitment, benefiting from feedback, continuing to find challenges, and discovering new outlets for expression that once might have been the result of work that was solitary and even sometimes lonely, have ultimately strengthened and bolstered us and inspired us anew. Please welcome Mr. Strompool, Mr. Updike, Dr. Stearns, and Mr. Nelson.
I'll be speaking about running. In pursuing my passion for running, which I began in the 7th grade, I've learned that an appreciative mindset is a significant factor that drives improvement. This appreciation boils down to 2 main areas. First, appreciate yourself. In running, you must appreciate your body, what it can do for you when you ask it. While this might sound fluffy, an athlete who truly recognizes the full worth of his body does everything he can to care for it and improve it. In real terms, this means getting out the door for a workout when it's freezing, raining, and no one else will join you, lifting and doing core exercises even when you're tired, and spending an extra 10 minutes in the miserable ice bath after everyone else has left for the day. For me, it means waking up at 5:30 a.m., as I did this morning, to run 8 miles before school, giving me enough time to stretch, hydrate, and ice before making it to homeroom. I never short myself on those little things because I appreciate what I'm asking my body to do for me. To appreciate yourself as an athlete is to make a covenant with your body. Your body agrees to perform at an improving rate if you're willing to do all the little things necessary to give it that opportunity. Second, appreciate others. Value the people who contribute to your success. The parents who drive you to practice and nag you about your eating habits and your bedtime. The coaches who spend hours building a training program for you. The refectory workers who relieve you of the need to cook and clean up after yourself. The trainers who tape you up. And especially the opponents who drive you to succeed. Appreciating the work that others do to help you gives you teammates in your pursuit of excellence, a pursuit that can often feel like a lonely exercise. Too exhausted to contemplate another interval or rehearsal? I've been there. And when I have, I think that of all the people and what they have done to get me this far, and I use their efforts to summon the strength that I need to continue. scoring out every meet, strategizing how to win, collecting every athlete's statistics, and creating practice plans for every boy. I do that because I appreciate the effort that our boys and coaches put forth, and I want to honor those efforts in every way that I can. The RL Track and Field team's motto is love each other. We appreciate each other and the effort we all put in from top to bottom. And we understand that our individual efforts are critical to the success of our team. This appreciation makes us all collectively better. As for appreciating your opponents, when I lie in bed at night in the months leading up to a big race, I ask myself, what did my rival do to get better today? Did I do my best to match that effort? Appreciating my rival's hard work is one way that I motivate myself. And for this reason, I've always found trash talking to be a bit of a form of false bravado. If you don't truly respect the efforts of your opponents, then you're not doing all that you can to prepare to defeat them. And if you don't respect your opponents, can you even respect your own victory after the fact? While I could go into greater detail about the daily habits, skills, and mindset that I try to cultivate as a runner in order to improve, I believe that they can all be boiled down to consistent application of these two tenets: appreciating yourself and appreciating others. Listening to the hall today, though I'm not an artist, I appreciate Eric's constant effort to refine his work. And though I'm not a musician or a fly fisher, I appreciate the time and technique which Eric Zags and Dr. Kokotilo apply to their own passions. That's the thing about practice makes perfect. You may think you're alone, but you're not.
Singing. When the practice is play. Growing up, there was never a rendition of Happy Birthday in my house, sung without harmony. When I was very young, I would marvel at the magical musical powers my Nana seemed to possess when she sang the final line up a third from the melody. When I was somewhat older, but still a voice soprano, I would join her on the harmony, and eventually I began harmonizing throughout, inventing new harmonies each time, including some bass lines after my voice changed. I feel very fortunate to have grown up in a singing household. Attending church gave me the opportunity when I was young to practice sight reading by trying out the alto, tenor, and bass parts on successive verses of hymns. And after church many Sundays, my brother and I would hold a couple of tennis rackets, pretending they were guitars, and sing along to harmony-rich songs of Beach Boys, Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons, Simon and Garfunkel, and Chicago. For the Updike Boys, this was play, but it was also some of the best practice for pursuing my life's passion, singing. In my middle and high school years, I found two main sources of inspiration that provided avenues to practice and refine my singing abilities. First, the practice of intentional observation. In choral ensembles, at school and at church, as well as districts in all states, I would closely observe each conductor and try to discern the various priorities they held and the methods they employed to evoke a good choral sound. This process proved most consequential during my college years when I sang under a man who had become my choral conducting mentor, Jim Marvin. Picking up a variety of rehearsal techniques through the years not only provided the essential preparation for the work I do with many of you in Glee Club, Platonics, and junior chorus, but it also made me a better choral singer, more tuned in to my part's contribution to the overall sound. Second is the practice of imitation, which for me was focused on the pop rock piano men from the 1960s to the present, especially Billy Joel and Elton John. After realizing my piano abilities would never be worthy of any recital hall showcasing, the best way to make use of my modest keyboard skills was in support of my love of singing. Learning to play and sing pop and rock songs was certainly a favorite form of play for me as a teenager, but it also forced me to develop and practice vocal techniques that would stretch my range, adding more tenor to baritone. Those techniques continue to serve me well today as I write, arrange, and perform with my vocal band, Similar Jones. You can see us in action along with the Platonics, shameless plug, at RL's annual Acapella Fest. That's right.
seems, at first anyway, to arise spontaneously, mysteriously. It's energizing and super fun. It's a process of discovery, of being in the zone, more like thinking when you're on a roll than any record of thoughts fashioned beforehand, which is more like analytical writing is for me. But there's always a tension between that first mysterious gift and revisioning poem. I like that word revision with a hyphen, where I try to pay close attention to details and to leave room for surprises. Because language is wonderfully layered and tricky. We can hear and say in it more than we intend to, especially when we really attend to it. You always pay close attention to details and anything that truly matters to you. You move past fear. And in poetry, those details of craft have to do with things like rhythm, meter, diction, syntax, imagery, things I learned about in English classes, and by reading and imitating. Reading and rereading, especially, have helped me work out what I want my own tone of voice to sound like. Now, every working poet I know has, over time, created a kind of personal anthology of most influential work. For me, those voices include the greats, like Keats and Whitman and Dickinson and Bishop, as well as teachers and like-minded contemporary poets. I also have a few good readers, honest but generous writer friends who help me see when my words have been faithful to a thought or a feeling and will tell me when those words go awry. How do I know when I get a new poem right? Well, right never means perfect. It only means I understand my intentions more as I explore fuller senses of feeling and thinking as I wrestle with nuance and doubt. That exploratory work takes a certain amount of self-trust that I'll get there, especially when there is what is most real in my heart or mind. But if close attention turns into a desire for perfection, that just turns off the flow, locks the door, and I end up perfectly silent. Thank you.
Acting. It's not about you. In graduate school for theater, along with all the technical training, voice work, movement, dance, improvisation, it really all comes down to scene work. In a way, you do all the practice, do all the training that you can do, so that you can let go of all that practice and training and just play the scene. No one ever talks about rehearsing a scene until it's perfect, especially since your focus as an actor in a scene is on two things: the other actor, character, and listening. It's not about you. So much of the daily technical training one takes part in feels very focused on oneself, your voice, your physicality, your imagination, your openness. But then, there you are, rehearsing or performing a scene, and you are turning all your attention to the other person. You let go of all that self-focused practice and listen with your ears, body, emotions, for what the other actor is giving you. So the paradox is, you train and train and train, practice and practice and practice, so that you can let go of all that in order to be fully present with the other actor in the scene. It's not about you. A scene may not be exactly the same each time you perform it, and therefore it may never be perfect. But you hope that your work brings you to the place where you are fully present.
for their willingness to disclose important and often personal aspects of who they are, and especially how they practice in order not to achieve perfection, but to improve. Know the satisfaction and even joy from doing something really well. Over time, much of what these boys and our teachers have described informs their relationships with others. As they participate on teams, as part of ensembles, and other work settings where the team benefits from the good work of individuals. We often find important new partners for our efforts. Finally today, I want to remind you of why we are even discussing these topics. Each of us is capable of great things. We may not always concede that that is true. We have bad days. We have unproductive stretches. We have failed attempts. We become discouraged. We wonder if all the work is worth it. When we have these doubts, when we feel like throwing in the towel and receding into easy mediocrity, I want you to access a deep wellspring of support that is within you. I want you to resort to common techniques, repetition, imitation, routine, a muscle memory long established, often over many years. I want you to seek out role models, paragons of the passion you're pursuing, great artists, athletes, scholars, people. I want you to study them and discover how they've gotten to be so good at what they do, and especially what makes them distinctive. Not just another high-scoring hockey player, but someone with flair, with personality, with style. I want you to hold close a sense of the ideal and strive for it. I want you to rely on your own judgments and to tolerate and pursue self-criticism. I want you to take on new challenges. I want you to take on harder tasks. I want you to befriend more accomplished colleagues. And finally, I want to be sure that none of us lets the perfect be the enemy of the good. Too often we shy away from challenges and even potentially great joys because we are convinced we won't be excellent or certainly not the best. As we know from the way we operate here in our school, all kinds of contributors are necessary for a class, a play, a chorus, a team to fly. Each of us has something distinctive to offer. And that remains true and inherently valued regardless of whether someone is the best at what he does or even just excellent. Be wary of many external markers of your worth. The SAT scores, the college admission, the place on the all-star team, the lead in the play, the solo in the concert, the A+ in the class. Be your own critic. Measure yourself by your own developed standards and appropriate but achievable goals. And go for it. Each of us stands ready for you to be the best you can be, to pursue your passion, to know the satisfaction of getting really good at one thing, even as you are already quite good at many. And always remember, regardless of some admirable standard, that whatever you do is plenty good enough. I hope this spring, Barely Awakening, will offer countless opportunities for you to hone those important skills and commitments, to discover new passions, to affirm and delight.